With all of us excited for the return of the Bleach anime in just a few months, I thought what better time than now to dive into the most mysterious and powerful group of individuals within Bleach. I'm of course referring to the Royal Guard. I'm starting off by analysing the first member of the Zero Division who was mentioned within the manga during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. I am referring to Kirio Hikifune, the former captain of the 12th Division, who had left an impression upon his subordinates like Hiyori prior to her promotion into the Royal Guard. In this video, I will be talking about everything that we know about her character, including the relationships that she shares with the other Royal Guard members and her former subordinates who remember her fondly. In addition to this, we will be speaking about the role that she plays within the 1000-Year Blood War arc, how she assists Ichigo and the others with their training, and how she battles against Yhwach when he arrives within the Soul King's palace. So without further delay, let's get into my breakdown and analysis of Kirio Hikifune. Kirio Hikifune does make her debut appearance within chapter 516 of the manga, but as I have mentioned, we do hear about her character before this during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. Hikifune has two physical appearances which are very different from each other. The first is the oversized look that she is first introduced with. She appears to be a well-fed, purple-haired lady with very noticeable black lips. She is the first female character to showcase to us a different body type with a rounder, more plump physique, which is similar to the appearance of the Vizard Hachi. When Shinji sees her, he states that she appears to look very different from what he remembers of her during her time as a captain of the Gotei 13. The true form of Hikifune is revealed to us in chapter 521, as we see a design that is more in line with Kubo's signature slender style of drawing characters. We learn that Hikifune takes up this larger form in order to withstand and provide the large amount of reiatsu that is required for her cooking techniques. Because it uses almost all of her reiatsu, she is left with no choice but to gain as much weight as possible so that her body can withstand the process. Hikifune is a kind and cheerful character with a very animated, bubbly personality. Even when she is scolding others, she continues to smile, like in chapter 517. We see her striking Shinji for not greeting her upon her arrival to the Soul Society. We learn about her motherly side during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, where Hiyori refuses to accept Urahara as her new captain, citing that Hikifune was too kind and caring to be simply replaced by anybody. This motherly side is highlighted once again in chapter 555, when she gives Ichigo rice balls prior to him departing from the Soul King's palace to battle the Sternritters. Hikifune has a lot of pride in preparing her food because of her strong love for food. Contrastingly, we do see that she is stern and confident in her abilities while she was facing off against the Schutzstaffel. So now that we know a solid background of a character, let's dive into everything that we know about her past prior to her first appearance within the manga. The Turn Back the Pendulum arc takes place 110 years before the current timeline of Bleach. It is here that we learn that Hikifune was promoted from the captain of the 12th Division to a member of the Royal Guard. She was given this opportunity because she invented the artificial soul. This invention was recognized by the Soul King. Hikifune was supposed to attend the captain ceremony of Kisuke Urahara, but for some reason she was unable to attend it. Despite not seeing her, we are aware that she leaves a lasting impression upon all those who were close to her, notably Hiyori, who struggles to come to terms with her promotion, to the point that she hates Urahara for not being Hikifune. During the present timeline of the story, we are properly introduced to Hikifune after the first devastating invasion of the Quincy. With the Soul Society in a dire situation after the death of head captain Yamamoto, the Royal Guard, who typically do not intervene with matters of the Soul Society, are forced to lend a hand to the Gotei 13. Hikifune strikes Shinji after he fails to recognize her, until she speaks about Hiyori's well-being. He was genuinely surprised with the change of appearance, as he states that she seems to be a different person, and it is obvious that he was more familiar with her in her slender form. The Royal Guard revealed the true reason for their appearance, as they take Rukia, Renji, Byakuya, and Ichigo to the Soul King's palace. Hikifune shows her motherly caring side in chapter 519, when she scolds her fellow Royal Guard member Tenjiro Kirinji for not properly explaining the Soul King's palace to Ichigo. She then proceeds to tell Ichigo about the layout of the palace and how each of the Zero Division members have been given their own city within the Soul King's realm. Ichigo and Renji arrive at Hikifune's city Gatoden in chapter 521. She proceeds to prepare food for the two of them, encouraging them to eat, as she explains that it is her job to feed them, and it is their job to ensure that they get full off of her food. During the chapter, we get to truly appreciate the techniques and abilities of this particular member of the Royal Guard. She reveals to us that she has a passion for cooking food and feeding it to others. When she leaves to make the two of them dessert, she returns in her true form, which is her slimmer appearance that I explained earlier. Her sudden change in appearance shocks Ichigo and Renji. Hikifune explains that she utilizes all of the Reiatsu in her body while she is cooking, thus explaining why she is forced to gain weight prior to cooking, so that her body can withstand the pressure that her cooking has on it. She explains that each of the members of the Royal Guard have invented an item which has profoundly benefited the Soul Society, and thus gaining the recognition of the Soul King, who requests for the individuals to be enlisted into his Royal Guard. Hikifune was responsible for creating the artificial soul and the ability to insert them into a body. Hikifune states that the food that she makes is also imbued with Reiatsu, so it serves to enhance the Reiatsu of the one who has eaten the food, elevating the Shinigami's power. Now, before Renji and Ichigo leave her, she warns them to be careful in the palace of Oetsu Nimaiya, as nobody knows what he might do. In chapter 555, we once again see Hikifune express her compassion as she hands to Ichigo a package containing a rice ball that he can snack on if he gets hungry during his trip back down to the Serete. This, of course, is such a motherly thing to do, and she even comments upon Ichigo thanking her for the food, as she notes that Ichigo has changed since he had first arrived within the Soul King's palace, as he no longer has wavering and uncertain Reiatsu. In chapter 588, while eating, Hikifune senses the arrival of Uryu, Hashward, and Yuhabak into the Soul King's palace. Hikifune confronts Yuhabak and his elite guard in chapter 600, as she traps them in a cage made from a tree. When Lil Barrow attempts to shoot the cages, she explains that the tree is imbued with her Reiatsu, so the tree will absorb any Reiatsu attacks similar to the attacks produced by the Quincy. Hikifune is next seen after Yuhabak revives his fallen elite guard. Together with Kirinji, she attempts to block an attack from Lil Barrow, which was directed towards Nimaiya. They ultimately fail, as she is surprised to see that the Quincy's attack had hit its target regardless of their intervention. Hikifune is last seen within chapter 611, as she appears to have been defeated along with the other members of the Zero Division. Now, I have mentioned this several times, and it is important to emphasize this point about Hikifune's character, which is that she is a maternal figure, and that she is not shy when it comes to looking after her underlings. During the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, Shinji had warned the newly appointed Captain Urahara that he would struggle to win over Hiyori, because she was so attached to Hikifune. She was like a mother to her. So for this reason, it is disappointing that we did not get to see a reunion between these two characters, as I would have loved to see Hikifune catching up with Hiyori. It would have also been interesting to see her interacting with her successor Urahara, as he would have been explaining to her how he had transformed her division into the Soul Society's Research and Development Institute. I have no doubt that this would have made Hikifune incredibly proud, considering she was the one who had invented the artificial soul, proving that she has an exceptional scientific background, which rivals the prowess of Urahara and even Mayuri. Hikifune had instantly taken a liking to Ichigo, as she made sure to feed him well and to look after him, as if she were his mother. She even defends him from her fellow Zero Division member Tenjiro Kirinji, and warns him and Renji about Oetsu Nimaiya prior to them setting off for his palace. Despite her encounters with Ichigo being fairly brief, they were enough for us to understand that she had adopted a motherly role with our protagonist, and ultimately she was proud to see how far he had come after he had completed his training within the Soul King's palace. Despite the fact that we don't see her interact much with the other members of the Zero Division, we do get to appreciate that they all have a mutual respect for each other, and they all approve of their leader Ichibe. She did express concern over the unpredictable nature of Oetsu Nimaiya, but this was more to forewarn Ichigo and Renji. As far as Tenjiro Kirinji is concerned, it seems as though she has a big sister type relationship with him, as she isn't shy to scold him when he does something that she disapproves of. Hikifune is regarded as a master chef, as in her own words, she states that manipulating food means to manipulate life. Her powers and abilities are best described by this quote, as she uses her abilities to feed her fellow Shinigami. By infusing her Reiatsu into the ingredients, she is able to make the food that empowers anybody who eats it, as it replenishes their Reiatsu. The ingredients found within the food are sourced from her very own body, and she uses these very powers to create the Cage of Life tree. In chapter 604, we get to see a glimpse of her Zanpakuto, as it takes up the form of a large wok spoon. We do not know if this is the release released or unreleased form of her blade. And sadly, this is the extent of the knowledge that we have of her Zanpakuto, as neither her Shikai or Bankai are formally revealed within the manga. In the end, Kirio Hikifune's character only appeared within the manga a handful of times, but her impact upon the overall story is not to be understated. Do I feel like more could have been done with her character? Yes, but I feel the same way about all of the other members of the Zero Division, who I will get around to making videos on. Despite this, when it comes to Hikifune, I am content with what we know about her, learning that she had invented the artificial soul, as well as being the first member of the Zero Division that we are made aware of, but we don't get to see her properly until 200 chapters later. The compassionate and caring aspect of her character was utilized excellently, as we see this side through how fondly Hiyori remembers her, and her bond with Ichigo that she forms. I do feel like so much more could have been done with her character, as like I mentioned earlier, it would have been nice to see her have a reunion with Hiyori, as well as getting to see more of her powers and abilities, as it would have been nice to see her Shikai and Bankai. So with all of these wishes of wanting to see her character expanded upon, I'm fairly confident that we will get to see more of her and the other Zero Division members during the anime adaptation of the 1000 Year Blood War arc. Now we are at the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about the character of Kirio Hikifune? Is she one of your favorite members of the Zero Division? I would love to see the discussion continued within the comments, so let me know your thoughts. Ichibe Hyosube holds the title of the monk who calls the name, and we identify him as the leader of the Zero Division, the one in charge of arguably the most hyped and most powerful group within Bleach. Has many sides to his character. Looking through his jolly and oversized personality, there is a sinister side, one that we get hints of within the 1000 Year Blood War arc, and we learn more about within the Can't Feel Your Own Word light novels. In this video, I'm going to be talking about every aspect of Ichibe's character. Although he doesn't appear much within the manga, I want to dissect all of his appearances, including his battle with Yhwach and the comments that he makes to Ichigo and the others after he is defeated, as well as the reveals that we get about Ichibe within Can't Feel Your Own World. So join me as I break down and analyze the High Priest Ichibe. Ichibe makes his debut appearance within the final arc of the Bleach manga in chapter 516. Through his character design, he may not strike you as being one of the most powerful Shinigami, or the individual who had chosen all of the names for everything within the Soul Society, including the names of Zanpakuto, Shikai, and even Bankai. While being oversized, bald-headed, and donning a really long black beard, the most striking feature of his appearance are his red eyes. He wears a standard black Shinigami Shihakusho under his white, long-sleeved Zero Division coat, and around his neck he has a set of very large red prayer beads, which helps us with identifying him as a monk. And these prayer beads are pretty similar to those that Akuma wears within Street Fighter. While initially we perceive him to be this big jolly character who is constantly smiling and remains positive, our perception of him is quickly shifted when we see him battle Yhwach. We then get to appreciate how sinister his smiling really is. Like I've mentioned, he maintains a very lively expression on his face, but Ichibe is not to be messed about with. He fully carries out the responsibility that has been handed down to him as the leader of the Zero Division, and he does not compromise on his authority as a Shinigami who has been tasked with protecting the Soul King. Like a lot of the characters within Bleach, he does not mix his words, and he's very upfront with what he thinks. Ichibe constantly smiles throughout his battles, which is evidently an intimidation tactic. Yhwach even comments upon this in chapter 606, when after Ichibe had resolved to kill Yhwach, he says that Ichibe appears to have become happier now that he has resolved to kill him. During his battle against Yhwach, Ichibe condescendingly cuts Yhwach's power in half, as he does not want to completely humiliate him by tarnishing his reputation with his underlings if he were to have defeated him at his full power, which Ichibe is pretty confident that he could do. The Soul King had bestowed upon Ichibe a powerful title, as he is referred to as the monk who calls the real name, and like I have explained, he is the one who had named everything within the Soul Society. With him being the leader of the Zero Division, he was actually the very first Shinigami who had evolved his Zanpakuto into its second release state. He had achieved this even before he had named the second release of his Zanpakuto Bankai. Ichibe refers to the evolved form of his Zanpakuto as Shinuchi. He makes his debut appearance after the Soul Society is completely destroyed by the Quincy. Following the death of Head Captain Yamamoto, he, along with the other members of the Royal Guard, travel to the Soul Society and speak with the Gotei 13. When Shunsui questions why they are here, Ichibe states that they have arrived following orders from the Soul King. They have come to rebuild the Gotei 13. But before this, he states that Ichigo needs to be taken to the Soul King's palace. Senjumaru then appears with orbs containing several injured Shinigami, as well as an orb that contains Ichigo's broken Bankai. When Ichigo questions why
they are taking him to the Soul King's palace, Ichibe states that they are taking him for a different reason. He says this with a very stern expression on his face, and this reason is only revealed within the first volume of Can't Be Your Own World, which I'll talk about shortly. Ichigo agrees to go with them after Ichibe reveals that while his Zanpakuto cannot be completely fixed, it can be restored to something that was similar to its original form. By using Kukakushiba's cannon, Ichibe and the others make their way back to the royal palace. After arriving, he tells Ichigo that he should be proud of himself, that it's not every day that an ordinary Shinigami is allowed here. But Ichibe then corrects himself as he states that he is not sure if he can call him an ordinary Shinigami. When Ichigo questions that he thought that they needed an Oken to enter into the royal palace, Ichibe states that upon entering into the Zero Division, their bones were altered by the Soul King, meaning that the key to enter into the royal palace is literally the bones of the Zero Division. He states that there are two ways to enter into the royal palace. The first is that they are let in by choice, or the second is that they come with the Zero Division. Aizen, on the other hand, had tried to create his own Oken, so in other words, he had tried creating the Zero Division by using his own spiritual powers. We see Ichibe again in chapter 545 when he comments on Rukia and Renji's progress. He states that they are doing very well with their training, as he then asks if the two of them will want to train with him in his inner room. We learn in chapter 564 that during their training, Ichibe had told Renji that he only knows a portion of his Bankai's real name, and the fact that his Zanpakuto had only taught him half of its name indicates that it only partly acknowledges him. It was difficult for Ichibe to tell this to Renji, especially after how long Renji had fought alongside with his Zanpakuto. He offers to tell Renji the real name of his Bankai, as he reveals that he was given an ability by the Soul King as the monk who speaks the true name. We learn that he had actually come up with the name Zanpakuto, and that every Shikai and Bankai Ichibe was responsible for naming. And in addition to this, all of the countless phenomena that occur within the Soul Society, it was Ichibe who had named them. He is aware of all of the names of every Zanpakuto from the moment an Asuchi is formed by Oetsu Nimaiya, and this Asuchi is handed to a Shinigami, thus explaining how he was able to tell Renji the real name of his Bankai. After Ichigo's training is complete, we see Ichibe again in chapter 555. He tells Ichigo that he doesn't have to worry whether if he will make it in time or not for the battle against the Quincy, since they have already started attacking the Soul Society about 3 hours ago, thus prompting Ichigo to immediately rush down to the Serite. When Hikifune comments that Ichigo has gotten so strong, Ichibe states that it's not that he's gotten stronger, it's the fact that he has grown. Ichigo is stronger in body and spirit, as Ichibe states that he has now become a true Shinigami. In chapter 588, Ichibe senses that Uryu, Hashwat and Yhwach have arrived at the Soul King's palace. Upon their arrival, Ichibe uses his powers to hide the royal palace from the Quincy. Yhwach wastes little time by confronting Ichibe, as he calls Ichibe by his name and asks whether if he is going to let him pass or not, but Ichibe tells Yhwach not to speak his name so lightly, that is, if he doesn't want to lose his voice, thus beginning the battle between Ichibe and Yhwach, where we get to see Ichibe utilize his full power. And similar to Head Captain Yamamoto as the leader of the Zero Division, it was very rewarding as we got to see him unleash his full power and the true extent of his Bankai abilities. Throughout this battle, Ichibe was very confident, and he maintained that sinister smile on his face. For the majority of this battle, Yhwach was utterly overwhelmed, and it's not an understatement to say that he was beneath Ichibe's feet, as even I had assumed that Ichibe had easily won their encounter, but unfortunately the tables were turned after Yhwach had revealed his ability, the Almighty, a power that can overcome any other ability. Now this doesn't mean that Ichibe's powers are to be taken lightly. In terms of his Shikai, it is released when he says the command painted black. His Zanpakuto transforms as the brush turns into a short-tipped blade, while in his Shikai, Ichibe swings his Zanpakuto Ichimonji as it releases ink, and anything that this ink covers loses its name and its powers. Because Ichibe's power derives from the color black, every time Ichibe releases Ichimonji, all of the color black from all beings, whether if they are dead or alive, become his power. Ichibe's Bankai Shirafude Ichimonji perfectly complements his Shikai, and it actually relies upon the abilities of his Shikai, which some would say is a weakness of his Bankai. Upon activating his Bankai with the command Shin-Uchi, Ichibe is able to change the name of any one of his opponents as long as they have been hit by the ink of his Shikai. Shirafude Ichimonji utilizes a white ink, and by writing on the bodies of its targets, he is able to change their names, thus bestowing upon his target the properties and powers of the name that he is granted. An example of this is when he changes Yhwach's name to a black ant, thus giving him all of the power and strength of an ordinary ant. And like I had mentioned, the only way that Yhwach was able to overcome this ability was via his own broken the Almighty power. In chapter 610, after Yhwach states that he is no longer nameless useless and powerless. He destroys Ichibe's body from the inside out by blowing up his torso. Ichibe's dismembered head falls to the ground as he loses his battle against Yhwach. After Ichigo and the others arrive at the royal palace, Ichibe calls out to Ichigo. He tells him to call out his name. After saying Ichibe's full name, he reveals that all power dwells within names. And thanks to Ichigo saying his name, he had received a small portion of Ichigo's powers, which had helped him to heal himself. It is here in chapter 611 that Ichibe tells Ichigo that he needs him to stop Yhwach. The fate of reality is in his hands now that the Zero Division has fallen. Despite the fact that Ichibe has regained his body, it'll be too late by the time that his strength returns. He cannot think of anybody else who has the power to stop Yhwach right now. He is not asking Ichigo to kill him, but rather just to stop him. The Soul King is the key to the world, he states, and if the Soul King dies, the Serite, the world of the living, Hueco Mundo, all of reality will collapse in on itself and disappear. He apologizes to Ichigo for handing him over such a heavy task, but the fate of reality is now in his hands. In chapter 612, after Yhwach impales the Soul King, we see Ichibe speaking to himself as he apologizes to Ichigo and his friends, as he reveals that they have no chance of defeating Yhwach. Now this is very strange of him to say, especially after he had encouraged Ichigo and the others to go and face Yhwach. This is the darker side to his character being revealed here, as he was completely aware that they had no chance of defeating him, but was still okay with them challenging Yhwach, even if it meant that they would die. He then says to himself that Ichigo and the others have nothing to fear, because this is what peace is all about, as he then refers to Yhwach saying, "Isn't that right?" It is because of moments like this that Ichibe's character is disliked by a lot of fans of the series, including myself. Despite being the most highly regarded and powerful Shinigami, through his actions we cannot help but to think very lowly of him. He is somebody who places the interests of the Soul King above everything else, and it is because of his devotion to this mission that he can come across as being very evil and not forthcoming with his true motives and objectives. Now my opinion of Ichibe had changed after his final appearance within the story, when he had apologized to Ichigo and the others, knowing full well that they had no hope of defeating Yhwach. It is like he had accepted that Yhwach was going to kill the Soul King and that nobody could do anything about it. Maybe this was a part of his ego speaking. If Ichibe, the leader of the Zero Division, was unable to stop Yhwach, then what chance does Ichigo have of stopping him? We learn more about Ichibe's true motives and the reason why he had wanted to take Ichigo into the royal palace within the Can't Feel Your Own World light novels. It is here where we learn that Ichibe had actually wanted to kill Ichigo and to cut up his body and to use his partially conscious corpse as the new Soul King, and this is the reason why he had trained Ichigo in the first place. I'm sure that this would have happened if Ichigo didn't end up killing Yhwach. After the end of the 1000-year Blood War arc, Ichibe had actually used the partially conscious corpse of Yhwach and turned him into the next Soul King. Despite how sinister and evil his plans were for Ichigo, he doesn't regret that he had them. During a conversation between Shunsui and Ichibe, as they discuss the nature of the current Soul King, Shunsui states that he is relieved that Ichigo didn't need to be cut down, but Ichibe states that Ichigo got lucky, as he didn't expect him to defeat or survive his battle against Yhwach. In volume 3 of Can't Feel Your Own World, we learn more about Ichibe's past and motives. During this final installment of this novel, he explains the true history of the world, as he states that originally reality was in chaos. There was neither life or death. Progression and regression were taking place at the same time, and it had taken 100 million years for the world to even stabilize. Eventually, hollows had emerged in the world and had started to eat human inhabitants, thus disrupting the balance of circulating souls. This had eventually given birth to the first Menos Grande. Due to the disruption of hollows, the world had stagnated until a new being had emerged called the Soul King. This transcended being had ended up destroying the Menos. Ichibe had admitted that at the time other special beings like himself had also emerged, but there was nobody who was on the level of the Soul King. This helps us to understand that Ichibe's existence predates the Royal Palace and the Soul Society. He was alive alongside the original Soul King in his form prior to him becoming a linchpin. The Soul King had continued to destroy hollows to protect the world, but it had caused the world to regress back towards chaos. In response to this, 5 powerful beings from that time had worked together in order to restore the world. We learned that these 5 individuals were the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. Ichibe states that he worked alongside them to split reality into 3 separate worlds. In order to do so, they needed the power of a transcended being, and it is for this reason that they had captured and sealed the Soul King in a crystal. Ichibe was a witness to the Soul King's powers being used to create the separate concepts of life and death, and the 3 separate worlds, and this was the start of the Cycle of Souls. The Cycle of Souls is the balance of souls in the human world and the Soul Society, and this is maintained by the Shinigami who kill hollows who to disrupt this balance. Ichibe states that he is unsure as to why the Soul King had cooperated with them. He speculates that it was because he had foresaw the future and had seen that agreeing with the ancestors of the noble families was the best option to take. But like I said, this is mere speculation, as Ichibe goes on to describe how one of the ancestors from the Tsuneyashiro noble family had mutilated the body of the Soul King, removing his limbs and organs, thus resulting in the Soul King that we know of today. Ichibe is convinced that the Soul King had chosen to live this life as a linchpin, but it is hard to say. Who would want to be mutilated and put on display as a false ruler? It can be said that it is Ichibe who is the true ruler, as he speaks for the Soul King and is the one who is maintaining this lie. From what we know, he is the only surviving person who is aware of the true history of the world, how it was built upon a crime that was worse than murder. Ichibe had lied to everybody and had supported the 5 great noble families in the capture and mutilation of the Soul King. If anything, he is a false leader who has shown his loyalty to the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. He is far from being a noble soldier of the Soul King. Ichibe never truly obeyed the Soul King, and he is responsible for a millennia of lies that the Soul Society and reality are built upon. While Ichibe plays a key role within the story, and he fulfills his purpose as the leader of the Zero Division, the information that we learn about him from Can't For Your Own World helps us to see a completely different side to his character, as he becomes a key figure in the history of the Soul Society. He has some of the most broken powers and abilities within all of Bleach, and just because he was defeated by Yhwach doesn't mean that his Shikai or Bankai is to be underestimated. They had a truly incredible battle, one that I'm really looking forward to seeing animated. Now, while within the manga we didn't know much about his true motives, thanks to the novels we get to understand more about him, and it's for this reason that I'd started to explain a lot of the goings on within Can't For Your Own World, as I believe that it helps us to understand more about Ichibe, and I wouldn't have been able to do justice to his character analysis if I didn't mention these key points. If you enjoyed me diving into novel exclusive material, then definitely let me know, and if you enjoyed my character analysis on Ichibe and if you learned something new, then definitely continue the discussion in the comments. Continuing with my character analysis series of the Zero Division, next up we have the confident and quirky Oetsu Nimaiya, who holds the impressive title of the creator of the Zanpakuto, and he is also referred to as the God of the Sword. He is the third-seated officer of the legendary Zero Division, and his unpredictable behavior makes it difficult to completely feel like you know everything about him. He has a goofy persona and he loves being over the top, as he compensates for the fact that he is a humble and grounded individual. His humility is seen through how he speaks lowly of his own Zanpakuto, despite it being an incredible sword. He deems it to be unfinished because it doesn't meet the definition of a sword, because no sheath can contain it, because of how incredibly sharp it is. So without further delay, let's begin my breakdown and analysis of Oetsu Nimaiya, as we go over all of his appearances within the manga in order to understand everything that we can about him. Oetsu Nimaiya makes his debut appearance within chapter 516 of the manga. He is a tall individual with thick black hair that is shaved off to the side, and strangely enough, he has dyed the sides of his head green. Another iconic feature of his appearance are his sunglasses that he is rarely seen without. Out of all of these Zero Division members, his appearance is the most quirky and out of place, as he wears a standard black Shinigami Shihakusho, but with a white sleeveless puffer jacket over it. This serves as his captain's coat, as he has the Royal Guard insignia on the back of this jacket. Like I had mentioned, Nimaiya is unpredictable, as there are two sides to his character. One where he is goofy, humorous, and he is all in your face, but contrastingly, when he is taking part in battle, he is savage and ruthless, and this is demonstrated when he kills off several members of the Schutzstaffel all at once. Even during his battle against Askin, he made a split-second decision that was very risky for his life when he had cut one of the main arteries in his throat in order to counter Askin's death-dealing ability. Like a lot of the characters that Kubo designs, Nimaiya is very cool and mysterious, and if it wasn't for him, then Ichigo wouldn't know the truth about his Zanpakuto. He was present when Ichigo had to confront Old Man Zangetsu, after Nimaiya had told Ichigo whether if Old Man Zangetsu reminds him of somebody that he had recently met. It was thanks to his invaluable help that Ichigo was able to activate the true form of Zangetsu. I'll talk more about the role that Nimaiya plays in helping Ichigo later on in the video. As for his backstory, like a lot of the members of the Zero Division, very little is known about them, aside from the notable achievement that they had accomplished which had them recognized by the Soul King. When it comes to Oetsu Nimaiya, he was credited with having created the Zanpakuto. After the Soul King had recognized this incredible feat, Nimaiya was promoted into the Zero Division. During the 1000-Year Blood War arc, after the first invasion of the Quincy, the Zero Division arrived within the Soul Society in order to help the Gote 13. He doesn't say much, while the other members of the Zero Division state that that they are here to take Ichigo and the other Shinigami to the Soul King's palace in order to heal them and to help them train for the return of the Quincy. We are properly introduced to Nimaiya in chapter 522 after Ichigo and Renji arrive in his domain. The two of them are surprised when spotlights shine down on them and a voice yells out to bow down their heads as they are holding them too high. He introduces himself as the creator of the Zanpakuto along with a strange rhyming rap, as we learn that Nimaiya is clearly a wannabe urban rapper. His over-the-top greeting leaves Ichigo and Renji quite stunned. He raises Ichigo's hands up in the air and does a strange clapping greeting with him, as Ichigo finds it difficult to keep up with his vibe. When Nimaiya realizes that Ichigo and Renji are insulting him, he asks whether if they want to go home. They then bow and state that they'd like to stay. He then tells them to bow their heads straight to the ground, as he takes a picture of them in this hilarious face-planted position. He laughs at their expense with the large group of females that he has in his palace. After having enough of his antics, one of his assistants called Mira instructs Ichigo and Renji to follow her as they arrive in his real palace, which appears to be a battered wooden cabin placed in the middle of nowhere near the edge of a cliff. We learn that Nimaiya had built that extravagant area because he found it difficult to accept that this is where he lives. After Ichigo, Renji and Kon arrive at Nimaiya's true domain, Kon is pretty upset and says that he wants to return to the other place. Nimaiya is glad that at least Kon understands where he is coming from. Ichigo and Renji then fall into a dark pit as Nimaiya asks them whether if it was strange that they had met no Shinigami on their way to his palace. All of the women that they had met in Nimaiya's fake palace were in fact all Zanpakuto. He finds it odd that Ichigo and Renji cannot tell the difference between a Shinigami and a Zanpakuto. He questions what on earth is wrong with them. He then brings out their damaged Zanpakuto and refers to them as heartless jerks who don't know how to look after them. He smashes both of their Zanpakutos into each other as he states that Zanpakuto that aren't properly loved are very brittle. Nimaiya challenges both Ichigo and Renji to get out of the pit that they are fallen into, as they are surrounded by angered Zanpakuto. Nimaiya then introduces himself for the third time as he states his name and declares that he doesn't make Zanpakuto for scrubs. With Ichigo and Renji in a pretty desperate situation, Nimaiya has no sympathy for them, as we firsthand see how unpredictable he truly is, as he shifts from this goofy individual into this very serious demeanor. He tells them that they are surrounded by what is known as the ultimate Zanpakuto that can become anything. He refers to these beings as Asauchi. Nimaiya reveals that he has created every single one of the Asauchi that are used by the Shinigami today, thus explaining why he is referred to as the Blade God. Nimaiya states that the Asauchi are angry at both Ichigo and Renji, and it isn't because of the way that they fight or the way that they swing their blades. He proposes whether if they have been using their blades as a tool, or whether if they have been interacting with it like a subordinate, or even relying on it like a partner, or even treating it like a family member or a close friend. Their treatment of their own Zanpakuto is reflected by the anger of the Asuchi, as it reveals that this is how their Zanpakuto feel about them. He then challenges them to face off against the Asauchi, as he wants to see who is stronger, the Shinigami or a Zanpakuto. In chapter 527, we cut back to Nimaiya's training of Ichigo and Renji, as 3 days have just passed. He is impressed that Renji was able to submit an Asuchi to his will, but Ichigo on the other hand has failed. He has little sympathy for his plight, as he deems him to be a failure. Ichigo wants to continue going on, but Nimaiya states that he wasn't chosen by any of the Asuchi. No matter how hard he tries, it's not going to change anything. He tells Ichigo to give it up, as he declares Renji to be a Shinigami while Ichigo is far from one. He tells him that it's time for him to go home, telling him to never return to the Soul Society because it is a place for a Shinigami, and if Ichigo has no Zanpakuto, then he is no different to an ordinary human, and he has no right to be within the Soul Society. Nimaiya says that he isn't going to fix Zangetsu, as he sends Ichigo back to the real world. After Ichigo leaves, Nimaiya states that he isn't there yet. In a way, he is impressed with Ichigo, as he states that he doesn't know what it means for him to have come this far without having a proper Asuchi. It is for this reason that Ichigo needs to go back to his roots, and he has to learn about his past. Even if knowing his roots means that he can never return to the Soul Society, it is important for him to learn the truth about his life and the way that he was born. In chapter 529, Nimaiya speaks with Renji, as he states that he is surprised that he did not object to his decision to return Ichigo back to the world of the living. He is certain that even Renji had noticed that no matter how hard Ichigo had tried, he would not have been able to submit an Asuchi to his will in his current condition. Nimaiya states that he knows the whereabouts of every Asuchi that he has ever forged. Every Shinigami is given an Asuchi. They then shape it into their own Zanpakuto through continuous training. This is the basics of the relationship that exists between a Shinigami and their Zanpakuto. No Shinigami since the beginning of the Soul Society has had their Zanpakuto awakened without an Asuchi being forged first. Nimaiya states that it was obvious that this method of training wasn't going to work for Ichigo. Before he can return and have an Asuchi submit to his will, he needs to learn the whereabouts of his soul. After Ichigo learns the truth about his mother, Nimaiya sends Mira to the real world in order to bring Ichigo back to his palace. We learn that Nimaiya had every intention to bring Ichigo back into his palace after the duration of one night, and if nothing had changed after one night, then it would be useless to continue with Ichigo's training. Nimaiya notices a change within Ichigo as he now tasks him to submit an Asuchi to his will. He then shockingly sees that every single Asuchi kneels before Ichigo and are willing to accept him as their master. After picking an Asuchi, Nimaiya states that he will personally reforge his Zanpakuto for him. He then takes Ichigo deeper into his palace as he reveals to him the area where his Zanpakuto will be reforged, telling Ichigo that this is where he will say goodbye to Zangetsu. He then summons his bodyguards as he begins forging Ichigo's new Zanpakuto. He tells Ichigo that he had taken his shades off so that he could see the color of the flame while he is forging the blade. He questions whether if Ichigo knows the reason why his Asuchi had turned white the moment that he had touched it, and why is it that it had started to resemble the hollow that is within Ichigo. Nimaiya then reveals to Ichigo that his Asuchi is in fact the hollow that is within him, as he states that Ichigo's Zanpakuto is his inner hollow. We learn that the hollow white had entered Ichigo's body and had fused with his Shinigami powers, and it was at that moment that it had become his Zanpakuto. This means that Old Man Zangetsu has been masquerading as his Zanpakuto this entire time. He then tells Ichigo that Old Man Zangetsu is in fact Yhwach from 1,000 years ago. He resembles the enemy because he is a manifestation of Ichigo's inner Quincy power, which he had inherited from his mother. After Ichigo speaks with Old Man Zangetsu, Nimaiya finishes forging his Zanpakuto. After Ichigo grabs the handle of his Zanpakuto and pours his soul into it, a huge explosion erupts, as we see Ichigo with a new dual-bladed version of Zangetsu. He then asks Ichigo what he thinks of his new Zanpakuto, thus concluding his involvement with assisting Ichigo in learning the truth about his past and helping him to reforge and acquire the true power of Zangetsu. This was a pivotal role that Nimaiya played within the story, and it was through his character that we understood and learnt more about Ichigo's powers and abilities, as well as the real identity of Old Man Zangetsu and why he resembles Yhwach from 1,000 years ago. We then see Nimaiya again the following day after Yhwach, Hashwat and Uryu arrive at the Soul King's palace. After Kirio Hikifune traps the Quincy within her cage of life, Nimaiya confronts them as he draws out his Zanpakuto Saifushi. We learn that Saifushi is kept in a sword tank, which is a large tank of jelly-like liquid. This is because his blade is too sharp and its edge is too smooth for any sheath to contain it. Nimaiya was able to cut down Gerard Valkyrie with a single swing of his blade. He then deflects several attacks from Lil Barrow, before also cutting him down with another swing of his blade. He then quickly impales Pernida through the head with his sword as he makes quick work of the Schutzstaffel. After pulling his blade out, he then cuts down Askin, but he only ends up slashing Askin's throat. He states that Saifushi is too much of a powerful blade to wield against normal opponents, so he is looking forward to using it against Yhwach, but he is surprised to learn that Askin had survived his attack. Then using his ability to death dealing, he explains that it allows him to control the lethal dose of substances, as Nimaiya ends up collapsing. He states that he has made the blood within Nimaiya's body lethal to him. In response, within the matter of a split second, Nimaiya cuts his own throat in order to let his blood pour out. Askin states that it is effortless, because he will die of one of two ways, either through blood loss or through the lethal dosage of his own blood. But thankfully, Nimaiya has Kirinji replace the blood within his body with his hot spring water. He then cuts down Askin as he turns his attention to Yhwach. Nimaiya reveals that the Royal Guard have very little information on Yhwach's abilities, so before anything he needs to cut Yhwach's arms off and then go from there. But before he can do anything, he is surprised to see Yhwach utilize his ability Ashvalen to revive his Schutzstaffel. While in a shocked state as he wonders how on earth the elite soldiers of the Quincy are reviving, he learns that Ashvalen redistributes the power between the Quincy so that Yhwach can revive those that he chooses. It is here when Nimaiya is eventually shot through the head by Lil wheelbarrows bullets, thus concluding his involvement within the manga, as it concludes his involvement within the 1000-Year Blood War arc. As somebody who is referred to as the creator of the Zanbakudo, it was pretty disappointing that we didn't get to see more of him, but I do feel like he got the respect that he deserved through how he had single-handedly taken out all of the Schutzstaffel. It goes to show when given the opportunity, the Zero Division does live up to the hype. I mean, Nimaiya was able to do all of this without even revealing his Shikai or Bankai. He wields the sharpest blade within the entire series, the only blade that does not have a sheath. Saifushi is one of my favorite Zanbakudo within Bleach. It is a sword that cannot be cut by anything, but can also cut through anything. Now, while we don't know the status of Nimaiya by the end of the manga, we do learn that he is confirmed to be alive within the Can't For Your Own World light novels. If you want to learn more about the fates of the Zero Division and some shocking facts about their leader, then check out my character analysis on Ichibe. But as for Oetsu Nimaiya, let me know what you thought of the creator of the Zanbakudo. Aside from his strange and quirky personality, he is a ruthless fighter, and one who is not to be taken lightly. Being one of the strongest Shinigami, Nimaiya has left a lasting impression on all of us, and this is without him having revealed his Shikai or his Bankai. So what did you think about this fascinating character? Definitely continue the discussion in the comments, and let me know if he impressed you or left you wanting to see more of him. Having first been shown to be waving the flag of the Zero Division, Tenjiro Kirinji is revealed to be a condescending individual who appears to care very little for others. However, upon analysing his character, it is apparent that he may not only care deeply for his allies, but his notable hot spring method was in fact invented for the sole purpose of helping others by being one of the most powerful healing techniques within all of Bleach. In this video, I'm going to break down and analyse everything about Tenjiro Kirinji, including his complex personality, his role within the story, and the unique abilities that he possesses on the battlefield. Make sure you stick around until the end of this video, because I'll be covering the impact of Kirinji's character on the wider world of Bleach, and a possible expansion of his role in the all-new Bleach anime. So without further delay, here is my comprehensive deep dive into the character of Tenjiro Kirinji. Kirinji makes his debut appearance within chapter 516 of the manga and in episode 8 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. The most notable feature of his appearance is his black stylish pompadour hairstyle with those Elvis Presley inspired sideburns. He is quite an intimidating individual with his tall and lean physique, easily towering over a lot of the other characters in the story. He is often seen chewing on a stick, and he wears a cropped coat with his bare body underneath it exposed, adding to this bad boy aesthetic that Kubo has implemented into his design. Everything from his clothing to his hairstyle appear to have been influenced by the popular Japanese delinquent trope. Think Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. His appearance complements his fiery personality and his over-the-top battle stances, which he demonstrates while preparing to battle against Yhwach. Kirinji isn't the kindest amongst the Zero Division. He is in fact quite an arrogant individual, thinking very highly of himself, as he is often seen putting others down in order to lift himself up. This is understandable because he has in fact achieved one of the highest ranks within the Soul Society. Despite his condescending attitude, Kirinji is just a really abrupt individual, but he does in fact have his redeeming qualities if you're able to look past his attitude. While not outwardly showing it, he does care considerably for his peers. This is demonstrated when he ensures to fully heal Renji, Rukia, Ichigo and Byakuya following their defeats during the first Quincy invasion. In chapter 545, Kirinji expresses pride and approval after Byakuya is healed, stating that he has stayed within his hot springs longer than any other individual. When Kirinji asks him if he is dizzy, Byakuya disagrees, stating that he needs to get stronger in order to justify holding the pride that he had held prior to his defeat. Byakuya's determination impresses Kirinji, which makes him smile with approval. Kirinji is known for his displays of confidence within battle, proving that he can be a very cocky individual, especially when facing off against his opponents. In terms of his abilities, Kirinji was responsible for inventing the hot spring method, which Urahara had even replicated within his own underground training space in the Soul Society. We see it being used as early as the Soul Society arc when Ichigo undertakes his Bankai training with Yoriichi. Believe it or not, this is the only time that we have seen Urahara replicate another person's invention rather than having invented it himself. Kirinji is able to manipulate the water of his hot springs so that it can do more than just heal, as he is seen to utilize his hot spring water for offensive and defensive techniques. Kirinji plays a major role upon Ichigo's arrival into the royal palace because Ichigo had first arrived within Kirinji's domain to be healed. He then warns Ichigo to be prepared for each of the members of the Zero Division, who we will be meeting as he progresses through the Royal Palace. So now that we have a basic understanding of Kirinji's character, let's dive into the details about his past and how he was able to join the Zero Division. Within chapter 517, we learn that while Kirinji was a captain within the Gotei 13, he had taught Unohana healing arts. We learn this during his arrival within the Serete when he asks Unohana if she had perfected what he had taught her. This is all that we know about Kirinji's backstory, because as you've guessed it, very little is revealed about the members of the Zero Division within the pages of the manga. Now we move on to his first appearance within the manga, which occurs right after the Soul Society is utterly destroyed following the Quincy's first invasion. Kirinji appears along with the other members of the Zero Division following the death of head captain Yamamoto, as he returns to the Soul Society to meet the surviving members of the Gotei 13. At the start of chapter 517, we see him holding a flag with the Royal Guard logo on it. He greets the Shinigami saying long time no see, and condescendingly asks if they are eating right, getting enough sleep, and if they are doing well. He is literally asking these questions right after they have been humiliated. He is the first amongst the Zero Division to speak and annoy the Shinigami. After he speaks to Unohana, asking her about the healing techniques that he had taught her, he asks about why they have just lost a bunch of men, wondering what the story is. Ichibe interrupts his conversation, saying that this is supposed to be a happy reunion, and they should save all of this boring talk for later. When Soifon is seen to yell at them for only turning up now and not having helped them while they were under attack, she ends up being ignored, but she continues to protest until Kirinji suddenly appears behind her, grabbing her arm and restraining her with just his two fingers and his thumb. He tells her that it is ridiculous that the great Gotei 13 had failed in their duty to protect the Serete. Contrastingly, the Zero Division's duty is to protect the Royal Palace. He asks what kind of captain cries for help because they are unable to do their job themselves. He then calls her an embarrassment. Ichibe once again interrupts the hot-headed Kirinji by whacking his head, reminding him to save the harsh words for later, because they need to first take care of more important matters, as Senjumaru reveals that she has already secured Renji, Rukia, and Byakuya. When Unohana objects to them taking the three injured Shinigami with them, saying that she cannot allow them to leave the Soul Society in their current state, Kirinji tells her that this is why they are taking them, revealing that they will never fully recover to their normal selves under her care. He pays particular attention to Byakuya, saying that he will definitely die if he stays in the Soul Society, because she cannot get the job done, as Kirinji tells her that he will heal them himself. He then states that even she knows that this is true, hinting that she has something else that she needs to focus on right now, which isn't healing. These words end up eliciting a reaction from Unohana, whose eyes look downward in contemplation. Shunsui has a similar reaction after he overhears his words and appears to understand what Kirinji is referring to. Ichigo, along with the three injured Shinigami, are taken to the Royal Palace by the Zero Division. Upon arriving, Ichigo thinks that he is going to meet the Soul King, but Kirinji asks if he is stupid, because there is no way that he would be able to see him. In chapter 519, we see Kirinji bring Ichigo and the wounded Shinigami to his palace called Kirinden. It is here where he heals them inside a hot spring. When Ichigo starts complaining and expresses frustration that he shouldn't be taking it easy in a hot spring, Kirinji advises him not to let that towel drop from the top of his head. When Byakuya's body rises up from the water, Kirinji dunks him back in as Ichigo continues to panic, telling him not to drown and kill Byakuya as well as the others. The Zero Division member explains to him that soaking them in the hot spring like this will result in their damaged spiritual pressure being squeezed out of their body with their blood. He then draws his attention to another red-colored hot spring nearby called Blood Pond Hell. After the damaged spiritual pressure is drained along with the blood in the white Bone Hell hot spring, Byakuya is then thrown into the Blood Pond Hell hot spring to replenish his blood. He explains that this process is repeated over and over until all of the rotten blood and spiritual pressure has been replaced within his body by the Blood Pond Hell water, revealing that this is his infamous healing technique. Ichigo wonders if this method really does work, to which Kirinji reminds him that he is a pupil of Urahara, making him recall that he had used a similar technique to heal himself when he had bathed in a hot spring within Urahara and Yoriichi's underground training area during the Soul Society arc. Kirinji says that Urahara has analyzed his water and had attempted to recreate what he has here. Kirinji tells him to stop complaining and to now bathe, because one night within his hot springs will result in him being twice as strong as what he once was. In chapter 520, after Ichigo appears to have been dunked into the hot springs several times, Kirinji Kirinji hits both Renji and Ichigo, stating that their work here is done, and it's time for them to now go to the next palace. After they leave, Kirinji is seen speaking to his underlings Kazuo and Kazuhiro, telling them that they can take off their protective clothes now. Now these are revealed to be made up of a super spiritual thread which protects the body from Kirinji's water, because if they weren't wearing these protective clothes, then the water would have caused the body to erode and rupture from the extreme recovery. His underlings tell Kirinji that it is impressive that Ichigo and Renji were able to bathe in both of the hot springs bare naked, as if it were nothing. Kirinji agrees with their sentiment, stating that they had exceeded his expectations, especially Ichigo, explaining that when he had attacked Ichigo, he instantly reacted by striking his fist and fracturing it. He was able to do this to someone who goes by the name Lightning Fast Tenjiro. We had in fact seen Kirinji demonstrate his speed earlier on, when he was successfully able to catch Soifon by surprise, who in fact is the leader of the stealth division. He goes on to say that he understands now why the Soul King is so obsessed with Ichigo. We see Kirinji again in chapter 545 when he calls Rukia to let her know that Byakuya has been healed. At the hot springs, we see him tell Byakuya that he is the first individual to have bathed within his hot springs for that long amount of time. He asks if he feels lightheaded, but Byakuya tells him not to worry about that, because he is aware that his powers are still not developed enough for him to get lightheaded. He says that having survived, he now needs to get stronger, so that he is deserving of luxuries like feeling lightheadedness. This response makes Kirinji smile. In chapter 555, when the Sternritter return to attack the Serite for the second time, we see Kirinji tell Ichigo that everything is ready for him to return to the Soul Society, revealing that he will be walking back to the Serite. Kirinji tells him that the journey isn't that long, especially if he uses Shumpo, because it's only going to take him a week. He is surprised when Ichigo initially panics, but then responds calmly to his taunting by saying that it should be alright. Ichigo explains that if it takes a week using regular Shumpo, then if he hurries it will only take him half a day, so everything will be fine. Kirinji tells Hikifune that Ichigo has just left after Ichibe reveals to him that the Quincy had attacked 3 hours ago. Hikifune comments on how Ichigo has changed so much, to which Kirinji agrees as they watch him leave. In chapter 588, when Yhwach, Hashward and Uryu appear within the royal palace, Kirinji along with the other Zero Division members are seen to react to their arrival. When Hashward calls forth the Soul Dart, they are immediately intercepted by Kirinji, who ends up defeating them with his Zanpakuto in its sealed state. Kirinji asks them don't they know who they are, as they have dared to enter the royal palace and they don't allow newcomers in here. He introduces himself as the Zero Division Holy Guardian of the East. Yhwach asks if he really believes that he can stop him, as Kirinji responds stating that he wouldn't be here if he didn't believe that he could stop him. He then pulls water from his hot springs and submerges Yhwach and the others. We see the Soul Dart complain about how hot the water is as it burns through their clothing. He explains that his hot springs squeeze out blood and spiritual pressure, stating that he will make sure that the temperature stays really hot for them to suffer. He then releases his Zanpakuto Kinpika as he charges towards Yhwach to attack him. In chapter 597, we see that all of Kirinji's attacks are ineffective, as he thinks to himself in frustration, why is it that he cannot land a single blow despite Yhwach not even trying to evade his attacks? For some reason, he is unable to make contact with him. Kirinji then stands aside as Senjumaru appears onto the battlefield. Kirinji is seen to be listening when the Sternritter W Nyanzol Weasel reveals his shrift ability called the Wind, explaining that he has the power to steer his enemies away from him. He explains that this is why Kirinji's hot spring water had swerved around Yhwach, Hashward and Uryu. In chapter 602, Kirinji assists Nimaiya during his battle against Askin, where he replaces all of the blood within Nimaiya's body with his red hot spring water, and this is after Askin uses his shrift ability the Death Dealing to lower the lethal dose of his blood. After the Schutzstaffel are brought back to life, Kirinji along with Kirio attempt to block Lil Barrow's attack, but he manages to fire through their defenses anyway, which results in the Schutzstaffel member blowing a hole right through Nimaiya's chest. The last time that Kirinji is revealed within the manga is in chapter 611, and it's not a pretty sight, as he is seen laying defeated on the ground along with the other members of the Zero Division. Similar to the other members of the Zero Division, Kirinji was hyped as an all-powerful Shinigami who is destined to have a larger role within the story than he actually ended up having. He is most well remembered for being the inventor of the hot spring method, a unique healing technique which had even inspired inspired the likes of Urahara, as well as being the individual responsible for teaching Unohana everything that she knows about healing. Without Kirinji's help, I doubt that Ichigo, Rukia, Renji, and especially Byakuya would have properly healed in time in order to counter the Quincy following the events of the first Quincy invasion. Kirinji was the first member of the Zero Division to confront Yhwach and the other intruders when they had first appeared within the royal palace. He had failed to land any attacks against Yhwach thanks to Nyanzol Weasel's Shrift ability. Despite this, he had continued to assist Nimaiya and had teamed up with Kirio in an attempt to protect him too. Kirinji's arrogant personality is balanced by the evident care that he has for his allies. Despite feeling like he is better than others, he still is responsible for having created one of the most potent healing techniques, which he offers to his allies with little hesitation. Now, on the other hand, he did appear to enjoy torturing Ichigo by making him submerge his head and hold his breath for long periods of time. Despite having been defeated and his story within the manga concluding in a very lackluster manner, he is still one of the most memorable characters amongst the Zero Division. Now, there is every chance that his role will be expanded upon within the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Hopefully, he will get more of a proper fight in the anime, and along with the other members of the Zero Division, they will get the respect that they truly deserve. Because as it stands, their current role within the manga was very disappointing, and it certainly didn't live up to the hype of this royal security force, which was hyped by Yamamoto during the Iranka arc to be the powerful but yet mysterious personal guards of the Soul King. Now, last but not least, we move on to the final member of my Zero Division character analysis series, as I'll now be breaking down and analysing Senjumaru Shutara, who holds the title of the Great Weave God because of her ability to manipulate fabrics and create custom garments. I'll be breaking down and analysing everything about Senjumaru, including her brief appearance within the manga and what information we learn about the abilities that she has and her notable contribution to the Soul Society, as well as the Soul King, which had resulted in her being promoted into the Zero Division. So without further delay, here is my character analysis of Senjumaru Shutara, the Divine General of the North and the final member of the Zero Division who I'm going to be analysing in this video. Senjumaru makes her debut appearance within chapter 516 of the manga and in episode 8 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Her most notable feature is her long black hair, which is tied together by a large golden accessory which is shaped as a crescent moon with rays emanating out from it. She wears a typical Shinigami Shihakusho with a white long-sleeved captain's coat. Over this, she also wears another white robe which is tied together at the front. She is fairly short in comparison to the other members of the Zero Division, but she makes up for this by wearing traditional Japanese wooden sandals which appear to be thicker than normal, which adds a bit more height to her. Senjumaru also has 6 golden skeletal arms which are linked to her back. She is seen to utilize these hands in place of her actual hands. She is able to extend and manipulate the golden skeletal arms with a considerable amount of freedom via a form of telekinesis. Despite her slim appearance, Senjumaru is not to be underestimated because there is a valid reason as to why she is a member of the Zero Division after all. Senjumaru has a lively personality which she demonstrates the first time that she appears within the story, with the musical instruments that she plays with her arms when the Zero Division arrive within the Soul Society following the first Quincy invasion. While the other members of the Zero Division speak with the Gote 13, she demonstrates that she is very dedicated to the mission at hand as she goes ahead and collects the injured Byakuya, Renji, and Rukia. She is also forceful and demanding, which is highlighted when Rukia and Renji think back to when they had visited her palace in order to have new garments measured and fitted for them. She had demanded for the two of them to remove their clothing, and that if Renji didn't, then she would make him feel a lot of pain, let's say. Despite her very brief appearances within the story, we do get to learn a fair bit about her mannerisms, as she is often seen to be calm and collected in most situations. Senjumaru holds the title of the Great Weave God, known for the incredible oaken clothing that she perfectly measures up and masterfully creates for others. Incidentally, Senjumaru's abilities are closely linked to fabric material, as she can manipulate cloth in any way that she desires. For example, being able to create illusions with cloth plots. So now that we have somewhat of a basic understanding of a character, let's go over her role within the story in chronological order. Unfortunately, the trend of knowing little about the backstory of the Zero Division members continues with Senjumaru. We can assume that she was promoted into the Zero Division at some point before Kirio Hikifune because of her inventing unique garments like the Oken clothing. Senjumaru is introduced into the story when she appears within the Serete along with the other Zero Division members following the death of Head Captain Yamamoto. She is seen playing a bunch of musical instruments with her several arms as they inappropriately create a bit of a fanfare with their arrival, and this understandably isn't well received by the Gote 13, who are freshly licking their wounds following the intense Quincy attack. While the other members speak about taking Ichigo to the royal palace, Senjumaru sneaks away to retrieve the bodies of Byakuya, Rukia and Renji, as well as Ichigo's broken Tensa Zangetsu, as she stores everything within these translucent spheres held by her golden arms. Mayuri asks if she had broken into his lab to retrieve Ichigo's Zanpakuto, but she explains that she didn't need to break in because she just touched the door with her hand and it swung wide open. She states that the security has become a lot weaker since the last time she was in there. Now this could imply that she had previously broken into the Research and Development Institute while Urahara was a captain, which seems to frustrate Mayuri because it implies that he isn't as good as his predecessor. When they return to the royal palace with Ichigo and the others, Ichibe speaks with Ichigo about Aizen and the Oken. Senjumaru adds to the conversation, stating that Aizen had planned to become God himself by creating life presumably via the Arancars and by killing the Soul King. She says that Aizen truly is evil personified, but she tells Ichigo to listen carefully, warning him that these Quincy's are an even greater evil than him. In chapter 545, we see that Rukia and Renji have fully recovered and they think back to visiting Senjumaru's palace when she had demanded for them to remove their clothes. Renji doesn't understand why they have to remove their underwear too, but Senjumaru says that she'll just have to take the measurements after removing his family jewels, which is totally terrifying, but this manages to get Renji to take off everything. Following this, we see Senjumaru again when she creates stairs for Ichigo to leave the royal palace. In chapter 588, we see Senjumaru react to sensing the arrival of Yhwach, Hashwad and Uryu when they arrive within the royal palace. In chapter 597, Senjumaru arrives to confront the intruders with several guards accompanying her. She tells Yhwach that it has been a long time, saying that he must have really lost his mind after having defeated Head Captain Yamamoto and thinking that he could arrive within the royal palace without an invitation. Yhwach ignores her and tries to walk past her, but she says that he will become the rust on the Soul King's blade. The royal guard encircle Yhwach, attempting to stab him, but all of their blades are diverted. Senjumaru wonders why on earth their blades didn't strike him as the stern-written Neanzal Weasel introduces himself. He explains that his ability allows him to steer things away, thus explaining why none of the attacks are making contact with him. Senjumaru says that he mustn't be able to avert the attacks of enemies that he can't detect, as a few of the guard soldiers attempt to ambush him from behind. Neanzal elaborates that it doesn't matter if he can or can't see his enemies, because all of their attacks will be averted. Senjumaru then asks him why is he assuming that the guards were the opponents that he is unable to see, as she reveals that she was able to remake the fabric of his clothing with a fabric of her own, while he was preoccupied with the guards. She then showcases her own abilities, stating that she is known for her quick work, and that they don't call her Senjumaru 1000 Arms for nothing. She tells him to be grateful for the fact that he was able to wear a robe that she had tailored herself, revealing he is unable to now remove the clothing as he is impaled by dozens of spikes from the inside, which ends up killing the Sternritter. In chapter 559, Senjumaru tells Yhwach that their blades should be able to reach him now. This is before he summons the Soul Dart and the Shootstaffel. Gerard charges towards her to attack, which she attempts to block using her sewing needle, but he breaks through it and cuts off her arm. She then summons an oversized guard to stop Yhwach's elite guard, but the guard is defeated by Pernida and Lil. Following this, Lil aims and fires a bullet through Senjumaru's head using his spirit weapon, delivering a fatal blow which takes her out of the battle. Honestly, this is really brutal stuff, and following this in chapter 600, we see her collapse to the ground with a large pool of blood that begins to pour out from her head. Gerard complains about why he had to kill her, as Lil says that it was Yhwach's orders. He then tells Pernida to help him as the hooded Quincy curls up and contorts her corpse into a ball, which adds further insult to the whole situation. Moments following Following this, Senjumaru appears alive and well, stating that they had built a fake royal palace to lure them in. The real royal palace was hidden by none other than Ichibe. Now, despite all of this, Senjumaru is revealed to have been defeated along with the other members of the Zero Division by the revived Schutzstaffel in chapter 611. Senjumaru deserved a better fate than what she had received within the manga, and the same is true for all of the members of the Zero Division. Like the other members of a group, not much is revealed about a Zanpakuto, as it is left up to fans to speculate about the abilities and forms of a Zanpakuto. Senjumaru had a very unique personality, a great character design, but she was severely underutilized within the story, so hopefully her role is further expanded upon within the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Now, this was my combined analysis of all of the Zero Division members. I hope that you have enjoyed all of the time and effort that has gone into crafting one of the most comprehensive deep dives into the most powerful group of Shinigami within all of Bleach. Let me know all of your thoughts about the Zero Division in the comments. I look forward to reading what you liked and disliked about their role within the Bleach manga, as well as how you expect for their role to be expanded upon within the anime. Lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this very lengthy video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.